Good morning. Good morning. I'm Casey Welch, current chair of the Chamber's Legislative Committee. I want to welcome you to IMG this morning. It is a pleasure to welcome everyone here for the preview of our upcoming legislative session. Before we get started, I'd like to ask everyone to stand and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I want to take the time to ask you all to please switch your cell phones from phase to stun, if that's okay. There are several elected officials in the audience today, so please stand and be recognized when I call your name. We'll start with the Bradenton City Council, Gene Brown, former Senator and Supervisor of Election, Mike Bennett, Clerk of Courts, Angelina Conalesso, and USF alum, I'll throw that out there. Judge Inman, Judge Gilbert Smith, also USF alum. Judge Renee Inman, I saw Judge Inman this morning. Oh, she had to go to court, that's a good reason. Manatee County Commission, Commissioners Vanessa Baugh, I didn't see her yet. Commissioner Bellamy, I walked in with him. Commissioner Banak, I did see her. Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Servia, Commissioner Trace, I did not see her this morning. Commissioner Whitmore, of course, I saw you. And I want to recognize all the past chairs of the Manatee Chamber. If you'd please stand, we've got a great group of those who are here today. If you're a past chair of the Manatee Chamber, please stand and be recognized. Wow. And last but not least, my chamber friends and commandos on the Legislative Committee, please stand up and take a bow. Elizabeth, you're on there. Our sponsors for today's events is Charter Communications, and we appreciate their ongoing support of this great event. I'd like to ask Albie Kamansky to please come forward to the podium.
All right. Well, good morning and Happy New Year, everybody. My name is Albie Kaminsky. I'm the Senior Manager of Government Affairs for Charter Communications, also Charter Spectrum, as a lot of people know. And if I look to have a familiar face, it's because I was attached at the hip with Representative Boyd for the past couple of years. I think it was on November 6th that he came into my office and said, "You're fired." Something about term limits or something along those lines, but in all seriousness, I'm really excited to stay in this community and to be a part of the Manatee Chamber. Thank you, Casey. We've got a lot of exciting times ahead. President Galvano, thank you so much for your leadership into this community. It's been a long time since somebody has emphasized civility in the chambers, and we really appreciate that too. So we got great new leaders with Representative Robinson, Representative Gregory, and other leaders coming back like Representative Newton. Thank you guys so much. I'd be remiss if I didn't come up here and make a shameless plug on Charter Spectrum. Again, if anybody has any questions, I'm going to be focusing on Pasco, Pinellas, Manatee. I'm going to be spearheading the government affairs practice over here. The lovely Leah Brown is still going to be engaged here, but she's handling a little bit more of the government and community affairs. So just wanted to come up here, introduce myself. If anybody has any questions, I'll be around.
Really high.
You pay your the rent's too high. Questions at the end. Well, thank you all so much for having me. Thanks for coming out. Enjoy the pancakes, enjoy the politics, and let's have a good year.
Thank you, Albie. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say how relaxed former Representative Jim Boyd looks not being in the legislature. He looks happiest man in the room for sure. I want to point out to everyone at your table, you have a list of the legislative priorities this year for the chamber that our chamber committee worked so hard and diligently over the fall, starting in August and through October, and presented to the board for final approval, and the board approved these without any changes, and you'll see them there. And this is we went from multi-pages and 10-point font to one side of actual legislative priorities and one side of actual policies, which we've divided up, and they're actually in 12-point readable font, which I love, which is great. And we'll be going through these today when we get into questions after introducing the delegation. So first, I want to start by introducing our Senate President, Bill Galvano, and I just want to say that it's been a pleasure to work with you over the years, and a little history lesson. This is our third Senate President from Manatee County that has been elected to lead that chamber, and I think that's a great thing. As I hold dual citizenship as being born and raised in Sarasota and live and work in Manatee, I like to point out that Sarasota has never had a Senate President. So on that note, Senate President, toast that.
Who was the first one? Hey. Really? What year? 1854 was the first one. And that wasn't John McKay. No, he's having a great time now. He's living up in Tallahassee, and my understanding he was playing golf in Georgia yesterday. Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here with the best chamber in the state of Florida and probably beyond. Y'all deserve a round of applause yourselves for all the great work that you do. It's exciting times in the state of Florida. We've had a lot of transitions in the very recent past, like last week, and then back a couple months ago when we came through the cycle. And before I talk about the changes, I just will highlight that we did have a very spirited, tough cycle that we ran through this election period. And in the Florida Senate, we had a lot of battleground Senate districts as for the Republican majority. But we were able to come through, and we maintain a strong majority in the Florida Senate as Republicans, 23 to 17. We have some great colleagues across the aisle. But it was interesting to me as I've watched politics evolve throughout my career, and the amount of money and the effort that takes place. And President Bennett, you'll appreciate this, that we spent $44 million on what amounted to about 6 Senate seats. That $44 million. Our Senate Republican caucus raised more money than any legislative caucus in the history of the United States anywhere in the United States. So, and that was, and a lot of people in this room helped do that. We also had a gubernatorial race. We have a new governor who was sworn in last week, Governor Ron DeSantis. I'm very enthusiastic about his leadership out of the gate. He's been extremely busy making things happen. He was in this area on Friday at Moat Marine announcing his executive order on the environment. And I can tell you the relationship is very strong right out of the gate between myself and the new governor and the legislature in general. He made very clear that he wants to work with us. He realizes that we are a separate, co-equal branch of government, and he understands that we're not going to accomplish anything unless we're able to come together and work collaboratively. We also have a new House Speaker, Speaker Jose Oliva from South Florida. Speaker Oliva and I are very, very good friends. We've been friends for many, many years now, and I'm excited about him leading the Florida House. Very principled gentleman and someone who is above pettiness and wants to get to work and do the work of the people. And that's a good thing to have, because oftentimes between the chambers you have a competitiveness. I see some nods over there, and it's there's some gamesmanship. And one of the things I emphasized when I took the gavel was that it's time for civil discourse. It's time for us to put the cycle behind us and focus together on the work of the people, and to do it with dignity and with respect with one another, with both parties, between the chambers, and certainly for the people we represent. We also have a new First Lady of the Florida Senate, and someone who's very, very special. And this is an important role. And, you know, you talk about me being Senate President, but with being First Lady of the Florida Senate comes a lot of duties. In fact, she runs what goes on with the spouses and events and things of that nature, and we're all very, very excited. And she's already developed a great relationship with Casey DeSantis, the First Lady of Florida. So I'm going to recognize the First Lady, my wife, Julie Galvano. Well, we have presently a very strong economy in Florida, and a lot of the decisions that we've made in the past have brought us to this point. And what do I mean by that? We're at a point where we are a AAA rated by all three rating agencies, first time in Florida history. Our unemployment outpaces the nation. Our debt is the lowest that it has been in decades. By all accounts, our fiscal forecast is positive. And so out of the gate, I think the very first thing that the governor and the speaker and I have talked about is, you know, let's build on what we've done. Let's recognize that we've had some great decisions through past legislatures with Representative Boyd or Senator Bennett, and realize that we are in a good place, and make sure that we continue to move in that direction, making sure that we keep taxes low, reduce taxes even further. We're looking at the commercial lease tax. I think that's something that there's an appetite to peel back, continuing to make sure that we are reasonable in our regulation, make sure that things are necessary before we enact them, to make sure that you all are able to exist in an environment of success. You know, we can't score the game, so to speak, but we could guarantee that the playing field is level. And the one thing that leadership in both chambers and the governor's mansion knows is, and recognizes, is that government's not the answer. You know, we're a small part, we have a role, but you all in this room are the answer, and that's what we're going to continue to make sure we prioritize. Notwithstanding the positive strength of our economy and the forecast, we still have some challenges. We just came through a bad storm event in the Panhandle, Hurricane Michael. At this point, we've got it calculated about $1.1 billion in cost to the state of Florida. You know, some of that we will recover from the federal government, but we're still, you know, have money outstanding from Hurricane Irma, about $350 million. And there are people who are still, it's only been like a little over 90 days. It seems like a long time ago, but it really hasn't. There are people who are still suffering in the Panhandle that need our help. In addition to that, we have watched the timber industry take a tremendous beating in the Panhandle. And for a lot of folks, their acreage of timber was their retirement. They had planned to like sell off a little bit at a time, and that's not something you could just turn around and replace. And so we are cautiously optimistic economically, but we know we have items that need our attention and things that we will have to spend our budget dollars on, and we'll have to prioritize. And I tell you that because I think I've gotten a lot of ask from this community. But in all seriousness, I'm going to do everything I can to support you. But we have to still prioritize the budget. With the legislature the way it is, with the governor's mansion the way it is, and now with a changed Supreme Court, we are also in a position where we can work together to be very bold in many areas, including education and empowering families probably more than they've ever been empowered before, and returning to some of the great ideas that Governor Bush had when he was governor. The Speaker has prioritized health care reforms and wants to move more to a free market environment, and that's an area where we're going to have a lot of negotiation, because we want to make sure we're balanced and moving forward, but there are opportunities there that exist. You've already seen that the governor has prioritized the environment. That's another area where we need to continue to do our work, make sure that we are doing what we can to mitigate the impacts of red tide, blue-green algae, and we just had like a perfect confluence of events environmentally, and we have done a lot in the past, and some of it is that it's just in the queue and needs to come online, but there are other things that we can do. For example, deep wells north of the lake. And we also have to continue to deal with security. The Parkland Commission, it's almost been a year since Parkland, and that occurred on February 14th of last year. And part of the legislation that I sponsored included a commission. And that commission has met and prepared a report and has sent it to the legislature, and so we're going to be going through that and implementing what we can there. Along that vein, I've created a committee called Infrastructure and Security, because I believe infrastructure is the key to the future, and security is just as much a part of infrastructure as anywhere else. And that committee, which is chaired by former President Lee, will be a major focus. And finally, I have a committee called Innovation, Industry, and Technology, and that's a committee where you can expect to see a lot of new ideas come through, everything from gaming to what modifications, if any, we make with medical marijuana, diversifying the economy, making sure our universities and our college systems have the opportunity to put discoveries into the profit bloodstream, things of that nature. So I'm excited about the session and look forward to working with you all and look forward to seeing your commandos in Tallahassee. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, I want to point out that in 1854, when President Snell was president of the Senate, Manatee wasn't even a county yet. We were still part of Hillsborough, so maybe they missed that part. Anyway, I want to. The next person I want to introduce is State Representative Tommy Gregory, who, until he was elected, was actually one of our chamber commandos and served on our legislative committee for the Manatee Chamber. I want to thank him for that. He was going to talk a little bit about his first term and his committee assignments. I think he, with his background, is going to be an asset to the Judiciary Committee. And also, most recently, last week in our first committee week in Tallahassee, he was elected as the vice chair of the Legislative Veterans Caucus. So I hope he'll talk about that. Ladies and gentlemen, Tommy Gregory.
Thank you, Casey. Well, first, I just want to say I continue to be humbled and grateful to serve you in the Florida legislature, and just thankful for the sacrifices of those that have gone before us in this capacity, Representative Newton and President Galvano. You know, as Representative, can't believe I forgot your name temporarily. My future roommate.
Remember, danger, Will Robinson, danger.
We've only spent every day together for the last few weeks, but you know, as we look to these gentlemen before us and see the sacrifices that they've made, it really is a remarkable thing. You know, as we've gone back and forth to Tallahassee 4 or 5 times now, and people say, "Wow, you really sacrificed a lot." And we think about President Galvano; he's probably made that trip, conservatively guessing, 300 times. Maybe many more. I mean, we really have a lot to be thankful for their service. Speaking of service, talking about the Military Veterans Caucus in Tallahassee, one of the first bills I'm going to sponsor, and it came from a local Gold Star family and parish, is going to be to get Florida to recognize the Honor and Remember flag. It is a ceremonial memorial flag, and I'm hoping that Florida will join the first 27 states that have already recognized it, and hopefully take this flag and make it recognized around the country. Of course, I think everybody in the legislature is going to do everything they can to focus on the number one issue that faced Florida over the last year, and that's our water quality and red tide. You've already heard Governor DeSantis, President Galvano, Speaker Oliva, all the leadership in Florida is talking about it. Frankly, I think you'll probably see more bills and more appropriations proposed than we have money in the discretionary budget. But that's good that we're all focused on it. Certainly with Moat Marine in our backyard, you will see all of us either sponsoring or co-sponsoring bills to focus the science on that effort and do everything we can to make sure we protect our tourism, our economy, and our water, because we all know that Florida is dependent on it. The other bill that I'm going to focus on right out of the gate is part of that free market approach to health care, and that is proposing legislation that'll tweak the requirements for mental health and social counselors. We know that we have what I would call a mental health emergency in the state of Florida. We need to make sure that we're making it possible for mental health providers from outside the state to come here and practice, because we know we need them. So let's let the free market work in healthcare. Let's bring more providers in and provide the care that our community so desperately needs. Again, I thank you for sending me to the legislature. I'm going to focus on serving you the entire time I'm there. If you haven't reached out to me yet, reach out. I'd love to hear your ideas. My legislative aide is here. Where are you, David? Right here. David Ballard. David Ballard, I stole from Senator Lee's office, so you can reach out to me or David Ballard. Again, look forward to serving you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gregory. I want to point out that one of the issues that Representative just talked about is mental health funding is on one of the chamber priorities. So on behalf of the chamber, I want to appreciate you working on that issue. Now I want to take the opportunity to introduce Representative Newton, who's, how many years have you come down the Skyway Bridge to this? Few years, and thank him for making this effort. Let me tell you something about Representative Newton. I've seen him at multiple delegation meetings, whether it's in Sarasota, Manatee, Pinellas, or Hillsborough, and as one representative that covers all those counties, he spends as most time in every one of them as he can and never misses a moment, and I certainly appreciate that. One thing also you may not know about Representative Newton, he's currently serving on the Higher Education Appropriations Committee, I believe for the first time, and we had some committee meetings last week that were entertaining nonetheless. So I hope, Representative, you talk a little bit about education and your priorities this session. Representative Newton.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, my strength, O Lord, my Redeemer. Good morning. Good morning. That was great food. Good morning. It's not like you guys sat for 45 minutes on the Palmetto Manatee Bridge or what can I say, scenic overlook is what it was. I was making great time until I hit that parking lot, and we got to do something about that. I am. It is. In fact, myself and Commissioner Bellamy is hosting a Transportation Summit February 25th at the Manatee Civic Center. So if you guys don't have anything to do, it'd be nice for you to come by and speak. We'll have the FDOT there presence and also talk about some of the challenges we have as it pertains to transportation, and that's on your list. So check that one off. Okay. As I was just stated, I serve on higher education. I'm the ranking member on business and professions, so you guys might know a little bit about that. Also state affairs and the department of the committee for children, family, and seniors. So, and I'm new to, I think, all of those. But I'm looking forward to working and crafting some great legislation to help move the state forward. First and foremost, I want to thank the chamber for what you guys do. You guys are the subject matter experts. I mean, contrary to popular belief, you think that the representatives know all and see all. We don't. And a lot of the stuff that you experience on a day-to-day basis in your membership, we don't know anything about until you come and share that with us. And we can work that into the conversation as we sit to the table and make the sausage, if you will. Also, I want to also put out the call to the chamber to, I know I got some emails. I represent Manatee, Sarasota, Hillsborough, and Pinellas. And I think from the Clearwater Chamber, they're doing something to try to help the furloughed and the workers who are not receiving pay during this government shutdown. That's important. They set up a food bank, I think, at TIA. You got a small airport here, I think, near in Sarasota that's got some federal employees that work there and they're not receiving money. I think the credit union is doing interest-free loans to help them because they will get back pay eventually. But just to help them get through. So whatever you can do to help our individuals who work and serve and keep us safe in the federal government would be gratefully appreciated, even if you can volunteer or make a contribution or send some donations to the food bank. I'm working on this session on higher ed is truly important. We have a lot of state universities, and we have a situation now with, I think, UCF. You might have read about that a little while back about operating funds going to capital expense to the tone of about $35 million to build a building that I don't know how the auditors slipped by and didn't see. But I'm looking forward to that conversation. What I'm worried about, though, is that we come down too hard and make everyone that wasn't a part of that suffer. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's going to be the right approach. If you were in the first subcommittee that we were in, actually wasn't a subcommittee. It had 4 committees that were meeting in that committee of higher ed because of that situation. And I think that that should be an isolated incident because a lot of these other universities and state colleges are doing the right thing, and they shouldn't be. That shouldn't be a 2x4 to beat them over the head with. That's my opinion, and that's what the conversation I'm going to bring to the table. I'm running a bill on. The legislature gives a taxing authority to the children's services boards. You may have read some stuff out of one of my counties about a lot of the gross oversight with your taxing dollars that they're giving out to these agencies to provide much-needed services and throughout my district and several other counties. I think it's about 7 of them, but basically it's a Children's Services Board. And what's happening is they're providing money to these entities because they say they can do things to help move the needle, like reading programs, but it's not working. And the money is being spent, I think it was $16,000 on field trips and $62 on books. And now they're pointing fingers at each other about, we gave you the money. It's, yeah, but you approved it, and back and forth, and nothing's happening. But all along, the kids from those areas are kids that participate and attended those failure factory schools that you heard about. And if you know about the young people, if they don't get early learning and being able to read by 3rd grade, it's almost a loss. You can catch up, but it's going to cost you twice as much money in resources and trying to help get them back on track. So I figure, I may be an optimist, but I think 100% of the money which was taxed and raised should be used for that purpose. Which brings me to my next one, which is affordable housing and the Sadowski Trust Fund. You know, for years we've been raiding that fund. It's my hope and my prayer that we come together, the new administration and the new Senate President and the new Speaker, Speaker Oliva, and try to find a way not to do that, to bring that money through for intended purposes. And also challenge the chamber to partner with Habitats if you're not. A lot of people and businesses, I think Clearwater Chamber and also the Pinellas Chamber are partnering. Some of the businesses, especially the hotelers, are partnering to try to build homes for their employees. Because while you hear about all these great jobs, Florida's a tourist state, and most of the jobs we offer do not carry health benefits and or living wages. So the people that work in these very same hotels can't afford to live there or even vacation there. So we got to be cognizant of that, because what's going to happen is what you have happening in Key West. They almost got to drive 2 hours if they can get employees to come do those jobs because they can't afford it. They don't make enough money to live there. So short of being able to get them twice as much as they're making, which I don't think you're going to do, you can leverage your resources and volunteerism with Habitats to try to get them into home ownership, and they'll become taxpayers. And I know the county are like that. But I look forward to your questions, and I really appreciate you guys inviting me. As was said, I got 4 number ones, 4 counties, 4 county commissions, 4 city councils, 4 school boards, and 4 delegations. Also, I was recently elected vice chair of my Hillsborough delegation, so I look forward to serving. Thank you.
Well, last and certainly not least, I want to thank you, Representative Newton. And as you saw, I mean, you were just checking off like all of our agenda items here: grade level reading, Sadowski funds, DeSoto Bridge. I mean, that's brilliant. You get the trifecta there, so thank you for that. Again, I was going to introduce Representative Robinson, who's a former chair of this committee, and I appreciate that, and served alongside with him on this committee. And we're also in his district today, so thank you for hosting us. And I hope he will spend some time to talk about our number 1 issue, which is water. And I think everyone who's been in this area for the last 6 months or more have realized how important water is to our local economy and just our quality of life. So I hope you'll talk a lot about some of the legislation you're introduced and how important that is to this community. Representative Will Robinson.
Well, I've been introducing myself in Tallahassee as the new and improved Jim Boyd, and they all seem to like that. And sorry if my voice sounds a little bit bad today. I actually came back from Tallahassee with a cold, and my car got broken into. So thankfully we have a new mayor in Tallahassee, so maybe things get a little bit better there. No, just kidding. Sorry for the political jab there a little bit. No, it's been a very, very busy week in Tallahassee, but one of the things I've tried to do is pull the curtain back a little bit and let people experience this adventure for the first time like I have. And I want to back us up a little bit to the middle part of November, and Casey mentioned it. We had an organizational session. And what was unique about that is our very own senator was being elected as a Senate president. So I wanted to see that. And so the Senate started first at about 9:30. And boy, what we do in Tallahassee, we love ceremonies and we love speeches. And that ceremony was going great, and we had a first and we had a second, and then suddenly they did a roll call. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we have an A and then down to the Z. And my assistant, Megan Heibel, by the way, who's here, my legislative aide, she said, Will, would you get out of the Senate? You're not a senator. The House is about ready to start. But I really wanted to see my friend and mentor, President Galvano, get elevated, because like Casey said, it doesn't happen every day that your community gets the Senate president. And I am just so blessed and humbled to be standing next to my mentor, Bill Galvano, as we move forward together. But I pulled my dad across the rotunda. You could bring one person on the floor with you, and it was just such a great experience for me and my family. And so we got done with the ceremony, and the one thing that I noticed, though, about the ceremony, and President Galvano mentioned it, is the speaker and the president were so respectful of each other. Speaker Oliva was there during Bill's ascendancy, and the speaker was, the president was there when Jose was ascended as the speaker. And I thought that was really neat stuff to show the respect of both bodies, that both the leaders are there to see the other achieve the top of that organization. And it's just been a wonderful experience for me so far. The committees that I'm serving on. The main committee that I'm serving on is Commerce Committee, and I met with the chairman actually on a Friday before I came back home. And we're really excited about the work the Commerce Committee is going to be doing. Criminal Justice Appropriations. Criminal Justice Subcommittee. I'll be on that committee. A lot of interesting stuff's going to come through that committee. Gaming. Higher Education Approps. I'll be serving with a representative here on that committee. And Agriculture and Natural Resources. Which is, I'm very pleased that the Speaker put me on that subcommittee, and that dovetails to the very first bill I filed. I heard about nothing else during the campaign than water issues, and I spoke about this at length during the campaign. To Floridians, water is the lifeblood of our great state. I mean, all we have to do is look outside. We're surrounded by three sides with water in our beaches. And it is so important, and I'm pleased that the governor, the speaker, the president have all made a cohesive effort to make sure that our water policy is the best in the country. And so I filed a bill to require that we maintain septic tanks. That's another issue that I heard about at length during the campaign, is we have these unregulated septic tanks all over the state that are just leaking toxic chemicals into our waterways. So there are three components of the bill, and actually the first two components of the bill were law about 10 years ago. It requires the Department of Health to inventory all the septic tank systems in our state, and then secondly requires a maintenance of those systems every 5 years. And then finally, a third piece, which actually passed the Florida House with only 2 no votes, was just a simple requirement in your real estate contract. I'm a real estate lawyer, but I think when most people buy a home, they don't know if there's a septic system in there. And so it's important, I think it's important that as a part of a inspection that you go through during your purchase of your home, that you at least know that there's a septic system in your home. So what's so fun about government is, you know what, I'm not the only person there. You got to work with 119 other House members. You got to work with 40 senators, and certainly there is a governor. So as soon as I filed that bill, I've had several members that have come up to me, both Republican and Democrat. Frankly, I was meeting with 2 Democrat representatives who wanted to have their say in the bill and to improve it. And so that was heartwarming to me that this is a bipartisan issue. And I was frankly talking to Senator Gruters on his drive back from his, by the way, ascendancy to the Republican State Party chair, and we were talking about the bill. We can't talk to each other, by the way. 2 of us can talk together. And he's filed that companion bill in the Senate, and it seems to be doing very well there.
You can talk to each other.
Yes, you can. Did I say can't? We can. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. Not the first time the president will tell me the right. Yes, exactly. We can. So the bill's doing great. It's at the very beginning. I'll have a series of other bills that we'll be rolling out, but I'm very excited. And the speaker also gave us, I have it on the table here. It's a diary, and he encouraged us to write down our thoughts and to experience this year and to make sure we can recollect back to the year that we've had. And I pulled out a card because it is very insightful and certainly goes with my philosophy. And this is from our speaker, and this was in each one of our binders, our journals. May these pages be filled with an account of your wisdom and courage in discharging your duties, but above all, may they tell of your restraint. And I think that's important. And as President mentioned, we always talk about government being the answer, but you all are the answer. And that's important because all of the great ideas that we get as legislators really come from folks like you. So please reach out to my office. As I said, my legislative aide, Megan Hebel's here. Pam Nickel, my district secretary, is here as well. And I look forward to serving with you over the next couple of years. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Representative Robinson. I'm going to take chair's privilege right now and ask a couple questions on behalf of the Legislative Committee before opening it up to others. We have, as I mentioned before, we have 3 members of Higher Education Appropriations and Senate President Galvano, who has been multiple past chair of Higher Appropriations. So I want to, if you look on our priority list, one of the other things other than water that has the most bullet points is education, not just higher education, but K through 12. Technical colleges, state colleges, and workforce education, which also Representative Newton had. So I wanted to open it up and ask on behalf of when we had our legislative committee meetings this past fall, other than water and possibly tied for second with transportation, was workforce and the availability of qualified and trained workforce in our community. And that's one thing that I've heard over and over again. And I just wanted to ask you all to comment on that and what the legislature is planning to do, or what your thoughts are, what the legislature should do to help us train and retain quality workers in our area and region. Anybody want to take that first? Sure. Oh, go ahead.
Great, thank you. And he's right. That's been talked about a lot, especially during the campaigns. The governor was hitting on that. I think all candidates of both sides of the aisle were hitting on it. And I think there's a recognition that what we do in terms of educating workforce has to have that nexus to what the demands of the marketplace are. And I've seen several bills filed in the Senate, both from a funding standpoint as well as a policy standpoint, to enhance the opportunities in workforce education. I know from my personal perspective, I think we need to put more focus on the state college system. We've done amazing things. Great, you can clap. We've done amazing things with our university system over the past several years. In fact, we have a top 10 public university. We have 3 preeminent universities, some emerging preeminent universities, a lot to be proud of. But when you think about workforce and demands geographically to certain areas, it's the state college system that is producing those workers. And so, I think that's an easy one on your agenda. I saw that you put a specific dollar amount in there. I'd caution you about that because we have to. Didn't I see it right there? You want to increase? You have to. I saw it. I thought you highlighted it for me. But so I think we're all on the same page there.
Thank you.
And I don't want to be remiss. I have my legislative assistant here, Ms. Michelle Grimsley. We also have a Minnesota secretary, Kadenia Hardy. She's not here, but we have an office on 63rd Street, just off 301. If you're familiar with Flowers Bread Company, when you're walking out with all your donuts, right across the street, can't miss us. And it's kind of weird because it's got a Sarasota address, but it's in Manatee County. So, but to the jobs, the vocational aspect of it is a short run. I myself graduated Northeast High School class of '81. And then I went over to attend ITT Technical Institute, have an AS degree in electronics engineering. Came out of there in '83, got a job with Xerox Corporation, started as a product support rep. After 18 years, elevated to senior printing systems engineer, only job I ever had. And it was all through vocational education. Nothing against college. I'm just saying that it does work, and I'm a product of it. I don't think I did too bad. I also met my wife at Xerox, so it was a plus, and we've been married 28 years. So vocation works. If you remember, and you probably do, the battle between Enterprise Florida and the almost the death of it, and we finally settled in an area to, instead of making an incentive-based program where, as our speaker, Mr. Corcoran was saying, where we picking winners and losers, we made it into a job growth fund. And that was funded, I think, to the tune of about $80 million, and it was to produce 90,000 jobs statewide. And what it does, it comes in and it provides workforce training. And I think Manatee Technical College got the very first partnership grant with that money. And that money is available for targeted industries, so you can train individuals to get into those high-paying jobs quickly, because that's what it's all about. Education is the key, and that's the new economy for individuals that's trying to elevate themselves up. You know, I mentioned about affordable housing, but you see a lot of T-cranes going up, and it's a lot of housing. You just got to be able to afford it. So thank you.
Monday morning, actually all day Monday, we had majority training, and 8:30 the speaker gave a very enlightening presentation, and he showed a chart, and the chart showed the cost of various items within our government, and he was very focused on a couple of the top items: higher education, textbooks, and healthcare. With respect to higher education, it had increased about 200% over the past 20 years, and healthcare had gone up around 110% or so over the past 20 years. And he made the example of other industries that government hadn't gotten involved, like televisions or cars, where the prices have gone down. Now, certainly it's a little bit apples and oranges, so to speak, but I do think that the speaker is going to put a great emphasis on the cost of higher education and healthcare. I'm very pleased to sit on the Higher Education Appropriations Committee, and we got a teaser from Representative Fine on possibly going down that route. Certainly, that's important to make sure we keep the costs low, but I certainly want to make sure, and I emphasize how many higher education institutions were in District 71. I want to make sure they're adequately and sufficiently supported, because we have great higher education institutions in our community. So if we can work together and keep those costs low and make sure we do the right thing, I think it's going to be a great year.
I will. I'll be quick, Casey. I know you want to get to question number 2. I'll just say I've got 3 sons. 2 of them are attending the State College of Florida Collegiate School, and one has chosen a different path. He's my youngest, and he came home one day and said, "You know, Dad, there's 3 kinds of people, those that are good at math and those that aren't." And but I think it's a good illustration of both where his focus is and where his strengths are, and really an illustration of all of us who came from families with more than one child, or maybe you have more than one child, and you know that we all do have different strengths. And through those strengths, you know, through that diversity, we have to take advantage of that, take advantage of those different strengths. And I think focusing that as part of higher education and vocational training, while continuing to focus on things like the nursing program at SCF and other opportunities, is the best way to ensure that Florida's economy is able to train people to the best of their abilities and retain them in the local area.
I appreciate that, and yes, Senate President, you are right. We have money on there, and that's for industry certifications. And again, I want to point out that, you know, this was something the committee discussed is we didn't want to be heavy to one sector, whether it was voluntary pre-kindergarten or postgraduate education. We thought it was important to the entire community that the entire spectrum of K through 20 education be funded, and I think the committee appreciated all of y'all's responses this morning, so thank you for that. One other issue that we've sort of touched on this morning, and I want to make sure I get a question on behalf of the committee to talk about, is our transportation request, and particularly not just funding in support of Cortez Bridge and the Anna Maria Bridge projects and everything else. But I think everyone who drove in here this morning and has been driving this time of year always talks about capacity. And I want to point out the top transportation item on the policy priority side is an ultimate I-75 concept, which would be the widening of the interstate essentially from Ellington down into Sarasota County. And we saw a presentation in the Manatee Chamber with the district secretary before the holidays about that concept, and just wanted to get the reaction of some of the members here about that and talk about transportation funding in general. Anybody want to talk about that? Just transportation?
I too had an intimate meeting with the secretary, and what I proposed to him after I was at the local electors stay engaged. And I asked him also, had he ever had a legislator come to him with the local electors, the county commissioners, the city council members, the ones who are in those areas where those projects are going or being led, and just had them talk to him and try to get to the table with him prior to a lot of that stuff going out. It's very important that industry and also the chamber be involved. You have to be at the table. If you're just there when they say what they're going to do, then you're going to get what you're going to get. And it might not be 4 lanes, it might be 2, because they thought that might be what's best for you. But if you're at the table, you're not on the menu. We're making it possible, like I said, again, I hate to keep doing cheap plugs, but on the 25th, we are having a transportation conversation. It does surround around the flyover, but more or less, it's to try to get the people back on track. Also, to have your people that you voted for and elected out front being in communication, so when you talk to them, they'll have vast knowledge of what's actually happening in your area as it pertains to transportation and transportation funding. That's important. We are statesmen. We have preference over state agencies. I don't run county commission. I don't run city council. But they also have to be at the table and know what's going on. The MPO, I think, is staffed by county commission and some private citizens too. So you have to know that, because a lot of people, more times than not, will blame the state for some of the decisions that are being made locally that has nothing to do with us, but they don't understand the process of the way that works. That said, when you see targeted projects come into your area, as far as to address the DeSoto Bridge and other areas, you're talking about millions of dollars that are going to flow through this area. A lot in construction funding and some probably in sustained funding and transportation-oriented development. So a lot of that you should be at the table just looking at what could be, because a lot of the funding, if you know it's a 5-year plan, to get into that 5-year plan before they pick a project and actually fund it. And they do P&E studies and all to make sure that they don't have any adverse effects on the environment and or the businesses along those corridors. Probably some of your members that may lose out when they expand these roads or do what they call a taking with eminent domain. So it's a lot of things you need to be abreast of, not just the amount of money you're asking, because a lot of that happens and then you hear the uproar, but by the time you hear that, it's already done. We had the same similar situation over in Tampa with the Express program, or what they were calling the Mercedes Lanes programs. But now what's been led is the expansion of the Howard Franklin Bridge, which is going to be a hundreds of $million project. And you have to be at the table to know what's happening with that and pushing that forward, and also making sure it's going to be best for your businesses and also the constituency in these areas. And I think that's really important. It shouldn't just be a campaign slogan when you're running. Because once we get elected, like they were saying, we work across state. We represent everybody now. You call my office, I don't ask you if you're a Democrat or Republican or independent. I'd say, how can we help? Especially as it pertains to state agency, because that's what we do. So I would tell you that it's nice to have them talking about this area, because that means money will follow. But it's also important to be at the table so you won't be on the menu.
Just make a quick point on transportation. Number one, it's billions and billions and billions of dollars. So again, we go back to our budget. We have a requirement to balance our budget. We're not like DC, and that can just write checks when they want to, which is actually a good thing, because this weekend, Congressman Gates was speaking to our assembly in Orlando, and he said, He goes, let me just make something clear about D.C. Number one, they hate us. He said our approval rating is 9%. Gaddafi's was 11% before they dragged him out in the street. But we have to balance our budget, so that's the number one challenge. Number two, we are going to look very closely at all the transportation projects in the Senate, because I believe that is the most important thing that we can do economically going forward, to have that infrastructure. But the Senate is not going to entertain any project that doesn't have a vision for the future, because transportation is changing rapidly. We have autonomous vehicles. You know, they want to do projects in Tampa with bus rapid transit. I'm not interested unless they put a designated, a dedicated lane so that we can change the modes as time goes forward. So we'll look at all these projects, but they have to be long-lasting, long-vision projects before we're funding them.
Thank you both. I want to encourage chamber members to please come up to, if you have specific questions, to come up to the microphones over here and line up, and I'll recognize you if you have any questions about the legislative session or some of the policy issues, and I'll go ahead and recognize you can line up. But while you're lining up, I want to ask one last question and just say one of the issues that the chamber has worked on, and particularly this delegation in particular with the leadership of former Representative Boyd and you, Senator Galvano, was on the opioid epidemic in our region, and that is still on our list as continued funding or legislation on increased access to behavioral health issues as it pertains to opioids. So I want to get one last, or one comment at least on that last issue before opening up, if you want to talk about opioids or any one issue. Sorry. Right.
It's not good when the Senate president keep looking at you and want you to jump first and make sure there's no alligators in the water.
I don't know if that's what I'm saying.
No, it is. But I don't know if you saw, but we had an article that came out, and it said Fed okays a plan to save $100 million on Medicaid for the state. Now, in that plan, it was also alleged another opportunity to get additional funding. As you know, we had $50 million for opioid epidemic, with Manatee being ground zero, because we have the most. They call them accidental death when I served on health quality subcommittee. And I couldn't figure that out, but I guess they say you're trying to get high, you're not trying to kill yourself. And I couldn't figure out the difference. But we also, in this restructuring, and I'll read to you what it's become, because we're just rolling this out. In fact, this article was December 3rd, so this is really recent. And what it said was, as it pertains to the CMS letter that was let Friday, it included approval of changes, including allowing the community mental health providers to participate in supplemental Medicaid funding programs known as the low-income pool. It said the change could also result in funding for community facilities, so that's a capital expense. Also, facilities that treat patients with mental health, substance abuse disorders, and including opioids. So it's additional funding coming through some other restructuring too. So be on the lookout for that. Don't just look at the one avenue that we've been getting, but it's not enough. As you know, our previous Attorney General Pam Bundy stated so when we approved that mental health funding and that opioid. Another bill that I'm letting also is a Need a Share program, which is based out of Miami-Dade, which has been successful. Do a pilot program to try to get that for this area, so we can start doing that around here too, because that helps also. A lot of the problems that we have that stem from the use of dirty needles. So if we can get that through both houses and get the governor to sign it, that'll be helpful also. It's proven positive down in Dade County, and we're looking to try to implement a pilot program here. But there's additional funding through restructuring of some of the Medicaid money that we already received. But we definitely need to make sure we find a way to appropriate more, definitely in the areas of mental health, and far more for opioids, because that's still a problem as we go forward.
I'll learn. I got up because I thought you were done, and I sat back down. I'm kidding. Another issue that I heard a lot about, and this is another bipartisan issue, is mental health funding. And I was so pleased with what we did last session, and I do think there's a big effort, certainly in the Florida House side, to make sure we focus on that issue because it's so important to our communities and to our state. I would like to see more of a global look personally because people come to my office and it's an appropriation here, an appropriation there. I would like us to see as a statewide organization look at this issue more globally and not just pick projects here and there. But I do think that there is a really big effort on the House side and certainly on the Senate side, hopefully, to make sure this issue is focused on because it's important to all of us. And we certainly know what happened at Parkland last year. So it's important that we focus on our mental health issues.
Thank you. Former Senate President Pro Tem.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
One of the things I would ask you all to do is there's been some movement. As you know, we got Amendment 4 through, and Amendment 4 is going to give a lot of people an opportunity to vote. Unfortunately, the governor has indicated they might want to take another look at that versus letting it be self-acting. I would ask that you force the Secretary of State's office, push the Secretary of State's office. They can set their own rules. They do not need to go to the legislature. We know if it goes to the legislature, it's going to be another year implementing it, okay? So I would ask that you do not let Amendment 4 come back to the chambers, okay? Make it be self-acting. I would hope that you would look at that. And the other thing I would ask you to do, and this is always a tough one, I would ask you to look at mandatory minimums. If you want to cut down on the number of people who are sitting and spending time in jail, okay, give the judges back the discretion that they need to keep these young people out of jail for soft crimes such as marijuana use and stuff like that. But I would ask you to look at those two deals.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike, we're on the same page, and we've already reached out to the secretary. I mean, there is a very clear class of individuals who have completed their service to society that should now be eligible to vote without further legislation.
I gotcha. I was very pleased. Chair Grant of the Criminal Justice Subcommittee in the Florida House, I sit on that committee, at the very first statement he made, it is not acceptable to walk this amendment back. And so that's from the Florida House side. There are some intricacies, though. What do you do with restitution? So if restitution hasn't been paid. So I do think there are some issues that we need to get through, but I was pleased that the governor, for instance, I counted 7 times he mentioned the word Constitution in his inauguration speech. This is part of our Constitution. In my view, we don't pick and choose what constitutional provisions we don't like. These people's rights have been restored, and we should not be slow walking it. So that's from the Florida House side.
And I agree. We took a Democratic caucus position that Amendment 4 was self-enacting, didn't require legislative action at all. It's a constitutional amendment. If you look at it, that was one of the only ones that was a citizen initiative. That's the power you have over us to bring forth this something to put on the ballot for you to vote for. What a novel concept. And that's the way it worked, and that's the way it went down. The people voted for it, and it's self-enacting. As you know, it was really to restore the rights of people that was wrong. It was a 150-year-old archaic Jim Crow law that was designed to keep African Americans from voting. But what happened was it spread it, and it affected a lot of other people. Contrary to popular belief, over half of that 1.5 million people that got restored are white males who had completed their sentence and paid their restitution and should be allowed to join society. And people are actually registering as we speak, and that's what should happen. The little small things, I agree wholeheartedly. We can empower our supervisor of election and our state election office to work out whatever little minor details they may have. I even want to go one step forward. I want to make sure that our state attorneys in the 4 counties I represent do not look to prosecute people if their intent is to register to vote because they believe after 15, 20 years or whatever, they have completed all their requirements for their full restoration. So they're not actually committing fraud for the sake of committing fraud. They just, from what they have, and we do have ways to track this. outside the legislature. So I will hope they reach out to those areas and do just that. As to the young people that we incarcerate, you're exactly right. When I served on St. Pete City Council, Hillsborough County came out with 9 things that they would not arrest juveniles for. And marijuana, I think, was one of them on there. As you know, it clogs our juvenile detention centers, it clogs our juvenile courts, and it's very costly to try to prosecute those individuals. Statewide, we lock up 96,000 people. And you saw an epidemic last year about health care for those 96,000 people because we passed a budget that had money in there for 86,000. So in return, to make sure that balanced budget, because that budget balances, we had to get rid of recidivism programs like drug treatment and stuff like that. Absent of those programs, those people are going right back, so you're going to continue to pay. I think the best thing we can do is on the prevention end and provide programs that change these young people their direction so they don't end up in our criminal justice system, which costs us a hell of a lot more. Thank you.
See, you're also learning why in the Senate we're done by 6 p.m. every day. And the House goes into the wee hours of the morning.
And the Senate's the more deliberative body, right? Is that okay? Okay. Just thank you for coming out. We want to remind we're close on time to our questioners, and if this issues have already been covered, please save them for afterwards. Or go ahead and say your name and the group I sort of preempted that with the Senate President Pro Tem, but if you'd state your name and your organization, please.
Hi, I'm Tammy Gowdy with Veritas Pest Management, but this issue is a personal issue, and I'm directing it with the President. I worked with your wife, Julie, at a local hospital, so I know health care is important to you. What are we doing about elderly care in skilled nursing and assisted living? The care is deplorable. When we have people that are not being cared for and things are not being done, these are elderly that we are to take care of. And I wondered if there's anything being done about that. It's very personal because my father died because of poor care. So just wondering if there's anything that's being done. I can direct it to anybody, but...
Okay, so elder care. You want to talk that real quick?
First of all, thank you, and that's a great point. One of the things that jumped out at me as I was reviewing a lot of the agencies is our Department of Elder Affairs needs to step up its game, and we need to help it too in terms of how we fund it. So we already are looking at those issues because it is a very important segment of our society that needs more attention.
Thank you. Charlie?
Thank you. Charlie Hunsker, I'm the Director of Parks and Natural Resources Department with Manatee County. We saw a connection this year with the scourge of red tide and its effect on our tourism, recognizing that clean water, healthy water is important to sustain that. And I wanted to remind you all also that brought awareness to our beaches. And Florida faces a large effort this year in beach renourishment. The Army Corps has a large federal supplement to undertake. Manatee County itself is going to see a $20 million project beginning in November on our beaches of Anna Maria Island. And state support there is very important, so I just want to put a plug in for the continued support the state has shown for beach renourishment, which has been very strong, very positive, and enabled us to sustain our beach tourism. Thank you.
So is that in form of a question like Jeopardy?
That's a form of a request to stay on it.
I think, yes, so moved. Okay,
that's easy.
Moving on. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Alicia Finn. I'm a local attorney. So really what I wanted to give more was a suggestion on higher education. So, and here's my suggestion. I think more information needs to be disseminated to the schools from, say, elementary age regarding the dual ability to get your high school diploma and your associate degree at the same time. And of course, we can work on implementing the vocational aspect of that. And the reason why I say that is if that child obtained the associate degree while in high school, it's more cost effective for those low-income parents when their children are very smart and they will graduate with already having a degree. And at that point, at 18 years old, probably they can work if they don't have the money to go right into higher education. So I know we're short in time, but I think that's very important because what I found out is that a lot of students are not informed. I'm from Brooklyn. Yeah, I'm Jamaican, but I'm from Brooklyn, and I went to high school in Queens, New York. And one thing my guidance counselor said to me was, do not worry about how you're going to pay for your education. First, you have to get in. So she made sure I was informed about what was out there. I went to the State University of New York, so yes, I went to a state school in New York because of that information. And look at me now. I never worried about the money to get there. My parents couldn't pay for it, and I have three degrees. I have a bachelor's in chemistry, a master's in environmental studies, a law degree, and a graduate certificate, and all because information was given to me at 16 years old. Thank you.
Thank you. We have on our agenda about dual enrollment, and that certainly is one issue that is very important. We want to make sure that the committee talked about the connection between higher education and the school district on dual enrollment, and that's important. Since we're running over on time this morning, I want to thank, who just stepped out of the room conveniently, our current board chair, Bill Polton, for allowing me to serve as chair, and of course my boss, Dr. Karen Holbrook, USF Chancellor. Wave to everyone, Dr. Holbrook. Thank you for the opportunity to lead this committee. And again, special thank you to Charter Communications, of course, our legislative delegation for your leadership and support. And METV, as always, thank you for your support. And of course, IMG Academy Golf Club for this fabulous breakfast. I got last one announcement. Don't forget to join the chamber on January 31st for the 56th annual dinner. And we'll be presenting the second annual Bob Bartz Award. Hope to see you all there. Have a great rest of your day. 5 minutes over, sorry.
Good seeing you.